Next one, many young women are concerned about the unknown correlation between COVID-19 vaccine and infertility, pregnancy, and complications. Understandably, those that are not vaccinated are fearful of infertility, and those that are not, sorry, that just repeats, I would imagine is one reason for the hesitancy to get the vaccine. If possible, could you please address or disclose any data or education regarding the vaccine and infertility?
So this is very interesting. I've looked into the history of the COVID vaccine and infertility concerns. And first of all, I have to ask, has anyone here seen the show Utopia on Prime Video? You know, Utopia is a show in which there's a drug company that wants to control the world. So they want to make women infertile by first creating a pandemic and then coming up with a vaccine that makes women infertile. And thus they can control the population and control the world. And this show came out in 2020. And, you know, when this came out, the IDSA, which is our society, you know, the Infectious Disease Society, they became very concerned as to why someone would come up with a show like this. And they talked to Amazon about that. And Amazon said this is actually a show that's been shooting since 2014. And we had it for release in 2018, and, you know, it just didn't work out till now. And it's a show that we copied from a British television show that was airing in England in 2013. So there's nothing, you know, diabolical or evil about what Amazon did there. But it just put it out there on the internet that there is a vaccine that can make people infertile, you know, as an initial. The other thing that we found was there was a doctor in Germany, Wolfgang Waldberg, his name is. He petitioned the FDA equivalent of the European Union, and he said there is a protein that's found in the vaccine, which is very similar to a protein found in the human placenta. And I worry that if antibodies are made against the vaccine, it'll go on and make antibodies against the placenta, which would then make a person infertile. So they looked into that, and it turned out there is no such protein. You know, it's like saying, Dr. Johnson and I, we both have phone numbers which both have the number 7 in it. So just because we have 7, it doesn't mean it's the same phone number. So it was, you know, looked at, and the European agency, that regulatory agency, said this is BS. But that is the other thing that came up. It suggested some infertility concerns. Now, if you look at the actual data, you know, when the Pfizer vaccine was being studied, they had 37,000 people in the trial. And out of those 37,000 people, half were women. And out of the women, 23 became pregnant during the trial. You know, they were not planning to, but it just happened. And when they unblinded the trial, they found that 11 out of those 23 were vaccine recipients and 12 were placebo recipients. So it was exactly the same rate between the two. And since then, they've looked at fertility. You know, this vaccine has been given out in hundreds of millions of doses across the world now, you know, approaching billion doses. And there is no fertility issues that have come up in any country. You know, it's not just the United States, this is being looked at everywhere. So I don't know where this infertility question initially came up, but there is zero evidence that this vaccine is associated with infertility. And if you think about it, if it's an antibody made against a vaccine, well, the same antibody is made against the COVID. So people getting COVID should never become fertile after that. And that's not the case. There are lots of women that had COVID, recovered, and then go on to become pregnant. So in my opinion, there is no evidence, and I like to see that. You know, when someone says that we have issues with young women and infertility, I'd like to see that evidence.
I just want to add also in the studies, when they did the animal study, there was no malformations that have been noted in the animal studies too.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say a little bit about the fertility thing too, because just of what I see in the office, and I think what some of the questions come from. I use a different analogy than the number 7. I actually tell patients a very similar thing about this protein because they ask specifically about it, and my wife always gets on to me about, because I try to speak Spanish and she speaks Spanish well. And then I miss one letter off, and I go, well, what's the big deal? She goes, well, what's the difference between car and cat? I go, yeah, I guess it's one letter, but that's the kind of similarity that the proteins share. The other thing is that when people talked about fertility, they talked about it changing their DNA and changing their eggs forever, and especially, you know, it was more that DNA thing that came up for me in the practice, and so. You know, it's important to know that it's even the mRNA, you know, vaccine. It never enters into the nucleus of the cell, so it's never in the DNA of the cell. We're not talking about changing the cells of someone's body forever, right? It has a local effect, the way it's distributed, the proteins are made. It's just not. It's not done like that. And so the idea that it's going to be part of you forever. Is not accurate. I think that's part of that fertility question that comes up.
Any questions regarding this from the audience?